There's a piece of advice that gets repeated so often we stop questioning it. Find a job you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. It sounds wise. It sounds like the kind of thing that should be true. But the more you look at how careers actually play out, the more this advice starts to look like a trap. Most of us don't work because we're overflowing with passion for spreadsheets or supply chains. We work because rent doesn't pay itself. And once you accept that a job is fundamentally a transaction, your time and effort in exchange for money, a strange thing happens. The pressure to find the one, the perfect calling that also happens to pay your bills, starts to lift. And what replaces it is a much more useful question. What actually makes a job good to have? Here's the case for boring. And here's where this gets uncomfortable. The job you've always dreamed about might actually have less incentive to treat you well. Let's start with the obvious appeal of exciting jobs. Careers in gaming, fashion, sports, entertainment. These are the jobs people dream about. Working for a beloved brand, being part of something culturally relevant, getting to say, I work in games at a party and watching people's eyes light up. It sounds incredible, and that's exactly the problem. Companies in glamorous industries know something about human psychology. People will tolerate a lot to work somewhere they're excited about, so they don't have to compete on pay, hours, or how they treat their staff. If you're not willing to work unpaid overtime or put up with a chaotic manager, there's a line of equally qualified people right behind you who will, because they too once dreamed of this job. Turnover in these industries is often brutal, and it's brutal precisely because supply of eager workers vastly outstrips demand for their labor. That imbalance benefits exactly one party, and it isn't you. Compare that to a company nobody's excited about, an insurance provider, a logistics firm, a regional bank. These businesses have to compete for talent the old-fashioned way, with money, with reasonable hours, with actually treating people decently, because nobody's staying out of starry-eyed devotion to industrial packaging. The data backs this up pretty clearly across industries. Unglamorous sectors like manufacturing, utilities, and traditional finance tend to outpay their flashier counterparts for comparable roles, precisely because they have to make up for the lack of cool factor with something people care about even more: a bigger paycheck. But money isn't the only thing a dream job can quietly take from you. There's something else at stake, and you may not notice it until it's gone. There's also a quieter problem with turning your passion into your paycheck. Even the best job in the world is still mostly made of unglamorous tasks. A game developer spends far more time debugging and sitting in status meetings than designing thrilling new worlds. Someone working for a professional sports team most likely spends their day the same way anyone else does, answering emails, sitting through budget reviews, waiting on approvals. The 10% of the job that looks amazing on Instagram is usually surrounded by 90% that looks like everyone else's Tuesday. And when you're relying on that job to also be your primary source of joy and identity, the ordinary 90% starts to feel like a betrayal rather than just a normal workday. Worse, if you loved something before it was your job, there's a real risk you stop loving it once your rent depends on it. Passion projects don't usually survive being forced, on a deadline, at volume, under supervision. Plenty of people who turn their hobby into their career will tell you the same thing. They had to find a new hobby afterward because the old one had been used up. And then there's the part nobody puts in the career advice books. Who your boss is may matter more than what your company does. Now here's the part people don't expect. Boring jobs tend to come with better management. Think about who ends up managing at a company nobody's desperate to work for. Often it's someone who's been there a long time, who isn't chasing a personal brand, who sees the job as, well, a job, something you do well and go home from. That kind of manager isn't threatened by your ambition. They don't take it personally when you ask for a raise or a reference or a bit of flexibility, because they're not measuring their own worth against how impressive their team looks on social media. Now think about management at a company everyone wants to work for. the ones with wait lists of applicants, the ones plastered across best places to work lists. Because they can replace almost anyone almost immediately, there's often very little incentive to fix a toxic culture. Complaints get treated as the cost of admission. If you don't like it, someone else will happily take your desk tomorrow. Some of the most infamous stories about brutal workplace cultures, grueling hours, screaming matches passed off as passion, burnout treated as a badge of honor, come out of exactly these kinds of aspirational companies, not despite their glamour, because of it. So does that mean you should abandon your dream job? Not necessarily. But there is a smarter way to think about the trade-off. None of this means every dream job is secretly miserable, or that every boring job is secretly wonderful. There are wonderful bosses at exciting companies and nightmare bosses running the most mundane departments imaginable. But the odds are stacked differently. A company that has to earn your loyalty tends to treat you like someone worth keeping. A company that assumes you'll stay no matter what often stops trying. So maybe the goal isn't finding a job you love so much you do it for free. Maybe the smarter goal is finding a job that pays you well, respects your time, and gives you a manager who isn't running on ego and adrenaline, and then spending the money and energy that job gives you on the things you actually love entirely on your own terms. Because what if the best job isn't the one that makes you excited to go to work, but the one that makes you excited to leave work? You probably won't put the company logo on a tattoo. You won't tell strangers at parties that this job is basically my whole identity. But you'll go home at a reasonable hour. Your paycheck will reflect what your time is actually worth. And the thing you loved before you had a job will still be something you love. Because you never had to hand it over. Boring, it turns out, might be the smartest career move you can make.